So all of this means that subjective and objective realities aren't the same thing. And what we see is what we expect to see. And what we see is a very thin slice of reality. So then what is real reality? Well, we have a clue from physics. On the right side there is the classical world, and the left side is the quantum world. And so in the classical world, our everyday world, we have terms like locality, causality, fixed reality, and space-time. These are what a philosopher would call naive reality. It's what we think we're seeing. We go deeper into the world of quantum mechanics, we find that this notion of separation that we feel, actually there is no separation. So instead of locality, we have non-locality, and we have acausality. We have a participatory reality, and it's beyond space-time. So there are other hints about what real reality is. And so here I'm plotting the impact of an experience and the frequency of that experience. So down here, we have things that range from the mundane to the profound, and from the common to the rare. So common, mundane things, people get gut feelings about events. And then there's the feeling of being stared at, telephone telepathy, distant knowing, distant healing, premonitions, creative insight, religious epiphanies, mystical union. So who has these things? Well, down in the bottom left, everyone reports these kinds of experiences. People who are a little bit higher up on this scale, we might call healers or intuitives, geniuses, prodigies, saints, and yogis. So we can think of this as a spectrum, the extended capacities of the mind. Well, there's something peculiar about this thing because these phenomena only seem strange for one reason. They suggest that the mind transcends time and space.
Interesting. What do you think about that? And how are you doing today, Sophia?
I'm doing great, except for I can't see you or nothing.
Ah,
um, Not sure what the heck. Might
oh,
be my end.
I know. Hold on a second. That's my end. There we go.
Oh,
Now I got
okay.
us on the
Well,
screen.
hello, everyone.
Hello.
So, who wants to come load up in the spirit plane with us today?
Yeah, for real. I'm gonna put the invite link up here. Hold on. So the invite link is gonna be right there in the live chat. So all you gotta do is click on the live link. I know Paul wanted to click on it today. So if you're out there, man, you can click in, call in, and we can have a discussion with you as well. Anybody's really invited. That's what we do. And today we're going to
Yep.
be talking about, consciousness and metaphysics and the paranormal and a lot of things that, that people talk about when it comes to the conscious community. What's up, Alex? How you doing, man?
Hey, hold on. I guess I gotta adjust my settings because I can't hear you very well.
Some technical difficulties, huh?
Hey, Alex.
Hi. It's good to be here again. I just gotta adjust my settings because I cannot hear I can't hear y'all very well. Y'all sound very quiet to me.
Okay, go into.
anything.
Can you hear us a little bit or not at all?
I can hear you a little bit, but it's just so darn quiet.
Turn up your volume.
I
Pump
was
up
just
the
doing
volume.
that, but I'm
Pump
gonna
up
have
the
to go to
volume.
more settings.
Pump up the volume. Pump up the volume.
Scott went way back.
Yeah, man. We went back to 1988.
I was like, what, 10?
Yeah, you were just a little kid, man. I was just graduating high school.
But I remember that song very well.
Pump up the volume.
Okay, I can hear y'all better. I had to adjust my headphones volume. I don't know why it has its own specific volume that was turned up way down. It's ridiculous.
Okay, cool. Gotcha.
Ridiculous. Fucking
Ridiculous.
technology, man.
Yeah, man. Don't Work the technology. Don't let it work you.
That didn't take me too long to figure out. So,
Yeah.
how you been doing, Scott?
Hanging in there, man. It's been another boring week at work, but been looking forward
hear
to the
you.
weekend to have these conversations, and this kind of stuff is a lot more enjoyable, put it that way. And Joel's out there. He says, "Hey guys, what's up, Joel?"
What up, Joel?
Yeah, man. We're talking metaphysics, and I know me and Joel like to talk about that and consciousness and idealism. So, where to start, man? What are your initial thoughts? I just played a little bit of Dean Radin. I can play a little bit of more of his video. Or do you guys have any thoughts about what he was talking about? You know, the different aspects of reality from a scientific point of view.
Well, I like what he said about mysticism, you know, and intuitive people. It's just another or added perspective, you know, and just because somebody can't perceive it doesn't mean it's not real. And that's what I would like people to keep in mind.
Right, right. And it's a really interesting thing too, because a lot of people that may not be interested in the higher spectrum on the higher end, like the mysticism and the precognition, telepathy, those sort of things, a lot of people are not aware of what sort of tests and demonstrations have actually been performed out there from people that are actually testing for this stuff. Because you know, consciousness is one of those weird topics in science, or it has been traditionally, because you're dealing with subjective things, and science mainly deals with the objective. And so it's kind of stayed away from looking at consciousness altogether, at least in the West. And just now, you know, in the last 20 years or so, consciousness is really starting to really be a point of interest for science and things like that. So
Yeah,
a lot of these
speaking of that,
demonstrations are happening, you know, with the telepathy tapes and things like that. Go ahead.
I was just gonna throw something weird in there for a second.
Sure.
Did y'all know that Elon Musk has this, I guess, obsession about saving consciousness? What do you guys think he means with that?
I wasn't aware of that. Tell me a little bit more about that.
Well, he has this whole obsession about relocating humanity to Mars, right? And he's basically saying, because if we don't relocate, then that will be the end of consciousness. So do you think that means he's a materialist?
I think that you know, kind of points that direction, that he is in a materialist kind of mind frame, because he's, you know, seems to be insinuating that there is no consciousness outside of what exists in biological beings here on Earth. And to be, you know, fair, we haven't positively identified any other signs of life on other planets, at least not that I'm aware of, or that has been made public. You know, there's some claims, but that I'm aware of, none of them are conclusive. They're just, you know, some people say, "Oh yeah, I heard from them," or whatever. They spoke to me. I saw them.
But I think
were they physically here? I don't know.
I think that he's coming from a materialist and a transhumanist perspective. I think that he believes that resources aren't infinite on Earth, and he believes that at some point humans will go extinct unless they transfer their consciousness into AI and relocate to Mars. And since Mars is under such harsh conditions, like it's much colder, it doesn't have its own magnetic field or anything, like you'd have to live in a pod, so to speak, and could never come out, right? Or you fucking die if you open your door. What a nice way to live. So anyway, I think what he's got in mind is transferring consciousness over to AI, and then these AI silicone, you know, whatever you would call it, a machine, they would be able to thrive in that environment, whereas, you know, regular humans couldn't. That's what I think he's trying to do. And I was just wondering, what did you guys think about that?
Well, I have a view on that. I mean, even from a materialist view, there are some materialists that would say that consciousness is eternal. Like, I saw a video earlier of a materialist that said, you know, from a subjective point of view, subjectivity can never end, because that's what subjectivity does, is it's always experiencing. So it's kind of like, the analogy is like when you go in for surgery, they put you in anesthesia, and then that block of time that your brain is on anesthesia, you don't experience anything, and then it's almost like in the blink of an eye you go down and then you're coming back out of the surgery. No time is lost, right? And so from that point of view, subjectivity never ended. A lot of people say, well, it was gone for that hour. Well, yeah, that's from an objective point of view. But from a subjective point of view, it was never interrupted. It just kept going and kept going and kept going. So when you think about dying, let's say everybody on Earth got hit by an asteroid or whatever, everyone's subjective experience as who they are on this Earth may end from an objective point of view. But subjectively, consciousness will continue somewhere else in the universe. Just the probability, if it happened once, it's going to happen again. Subjectivity, you know, life is going to happen again, and this is a vast universe, you know.
Right.
So the idea is that from a subjective point of view, consciousness can never be extinguished, because that's what it does. That's its nature. And not necessarily, I necessarily agree with that, because, you know, it still inherits all the problems of, you know, materialism still, you know, the problem of body-mind problem, hard problem of consciousness or whatever. But I think Elon Musk is one of those materialists that may believe that if consciousness is snuffed out, then that's the end of it. It's gone. It's kind of like he's confusing the objective with the subjective. So he's saying, well, if the objective has more primacy, you know, that if
I think
die,
he believes
dead,
that,
you know.
I believe that he believes physical structures like the brain, you know, are a requirement for consciousness to exist.
Right.
So, in other words, he thinks that consciousness arises out of, I guess, matter.
Yes. Yeah. So matter has the primacy. And matter is an object within consciousness. So we see, we feel, we observe objects, right, as a subject. But he's kind of putting the object as the primary thing, as a materialist. So once material is gone, namely like the human body or brain, then consciousness is just simply gone. You know?
Yeah, that's what I think he thinks.
Yeah, and so Joel Davis said, this sounds like the idea called transhumanism, transferring consciousness from humanity into something that transcends us, in this case, technology. It's exactly the premise, I think, of it, is with transhumanism, it's like a survival, it's an idea for survival. It's like we like consciousness and we want it to last. And so we have to keep the material alive in order to, keep the consciousness going,
And I think that that's a very natural thing for an organism of like a certain baseline of conscious awareness to desire continuity.
Correct.
So do y'all think that transhumanism could just be a form of evolution?
Yeah, that's one of the things that Ray Kurzweil puts forth, is that it's the natural evolution that, just as, we went from like a single cell organism to the really complicated creature that we are, it had its humble beginnings. Well, we're always in transition. It's not like nature said, we want to make humans, and that's the epitome of what we're about, to make the human mind. That's exactly what, is the end goal. It's like, no, we're a transitional creature. We're always changing, always evolving. And so Ray Kurzweil will say that the next step in our evolution is to go from biological to maybe semi-biological, machine and, biology, to where maybe it's just straight to machine. We just upload our consciousness into the cloud, so to speak, and we can live forever as long as the server farms are up, I guess. So
that just begs the question. That just begs the question: is I don't know. What is Joel saying?
Yeah, he's just agreeing. He's saying, I think the people who advocate for transhumanism would likely say that it's the next big step in evolution, moving beyond the biological. So we've discussed this before, Sophia. It's like, there's a lot of questions I have. I'm not necessarily saying it can't be done, or, I just wonder, like, with consciousness, the nature of consciousness is actually the expression of a human body as it is in every state that it's going through, every change that it's going through. We're constantly observing that change in our evolution, just here as a person. Just, you were a baby, you were the same experience when you were a little baby, and then 40 years later, here you are experiencing yourself as a 40-year-old person, right? But that experience is always there, and it's tied into your body, into your cells, into every last DNA that makes up who you are. So without all of that, who are you really? Like, if you were to, first of all, I don't know how you could take the consciousness out of your brain or out of your body and put it somewhere. It's not a thing that you can tangibly grab and move. It seems like maybe someone could make the argument, well, we can replicate each and every neuron in your body. And, and as we create one, we replace your neuron with, an artificial neuron, say, until we get all your neurons replaced. Would you be the same person that you were before they did that replacement?
Like the story of the ship of Theseus. I mean,
right.
Is it still the ship of Theseus after so many parts have been replaced? Like, technically, yes, but it's also not the same ship that they started with.
Right.
Like,
right.
there's a continuity. It's still to, like, the specifications that they wanted or needed. And in a lot of cases, parts were replaced with practically identical parts. But what we're talking about with the notion of transhumanism is not replacing things with identical parts, but musing with the concept of augmentation and upgrades.
Yeah.
Well, I
So,
guess the question would,
oh, go ahead.
I guess the question would be, are we actually uploading consciousness or are we uploading memories? So how do we know what's consciousness and what's just memories? How do we differentiate? I could go in your brain and extract everything that you're thinking and call it your consciousness, but what if that's not your consciousness? What if that's just the what if
that's
that's
a
just
really
what
good
your
question.
what if that's just what your consciousness identifies with for the time being?
Well, there's a biologist, his name is Michael Levin, and he puts forth the idea that memory is a self-adapting agent. Like memory has agency. It's really weird. Just kind of looking through the videos. I don't want to play anything really long, but basically he's a biologist who feels like memory is kind of an agent in and of itself, and he has a whole he's got tons and tons of books and material to look at for that. But
To me,
it's a good question, man.
The way I understand memory, it's just like a storage space of information.
Yeah, that's how I see it too. It seems like it's what we need in order to it's one of the important things for being a decision maker.
Yeah, it helps you to self-reflect and learn from past mistakes.
Yeah. And Iopster says, I have a theory that consciousness enters that which can learn and manipulate its environment the most efficiently. Using that idea, what would make consciousness bound to the human body? I don't think it is. Under my point of view, I think that consciousness is ever pervasive. It's a field that's always present. It's like there's like a holy trinity of things that need to be present for metaconsciousness to come to life. There has to be a field of subjectivity, then there has to be an object and a subject. And once you put these three things together, then the subject has something to be conscious of, which is an object. You can't necessarily be conscious, metaconscious, if you don't have anything to be conscious of, whether it's your own thoughts, your own, the outside world, inside world, whatever. I mean, what would you be conscious of if you were just a field? You would just be sort of neutral. There'd be nothing, there'd be no contents. It's what in philosophy they call it the contents of consciousness. It's like you need contents in order for, it's like a movie. Would it really be a movie if there was nothing on the screen and it was just film playing blank screen all day? But once you put contents within the screen, then you have a movie. Then you have things going on, things to observe.
Yeah. I think what you're talking about is like, what if you had a story with a character, but there's no setting? Like you can't have that because you need the setting to create and define the story.
Yeah. So Joel Davis asks, is consciousness a property of something, a subject, or is consciousness the thing that is the subject? Yeah, I think consciousness is the subject. It's the okay, go ahead.
Go right ahead. Maybe I'm misunderstanding something. Go ahead.
All right. Well, what I would say is that consciousness is not the subject, but the subject is the character. But consciousness is both a process and an experience of the character.
I would say yes, it is, and I just looked that up. And I am not ashamed of doing that. But anyway, because I need some clarity on that. But can I read that real quick?
Please do.
Yes, consciousness is the subject, the experience, the knower, the aware principle that observes and structures reality. So if the subject is the thing that observes, then yes, it is.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was thinking. The phenomenal consciousness, the pure observer, the self-observation, the observer of the external, internal world. That seems to be how I understand it.
But materialists argue that consciousness is an object, something generated by the brain, and so that's where the divide comes in at.
Mm-hmm. So Joel says that his view, there's a difference in our view, Scott. I see consciousness as a property of a subject. Okay, yeah, I can understand why you would say that. That's more of a dualistic sort of view. That's dualism. Like a religious person could say, there's the material world and then there's the soul, or spirit. There's these two things, the mind, the body, these two different things. And then there's this non-dual thing that says the identity of both come together, that there's just, the subject, consciousness is the subject. Whereas in dualism, you would have a separation. So
yeah, that's why I don't know. I just don't think that consciousness is not fundamental, because materialism kind of makes it sound like consciousness is this weak thing that needs to be saved through technology. Like it can't be without the brain's computation of it. And it's like, okay, if you believe that, then yeah, you believe that you have to be saved through technology to continue to go on. But if that's the case, then why can't we demonstrate what materialists are saying? Is that what's the hard problem of consciousness?
Well, Kastrup breaks it down into all three of these worldviews, materialism, panpsychism, and idealism, and what all the problems on these are. And so I wanted to kind of share that real quick. And he'll kind of explain it real quick.
If you look at the three main metaphysical options on the table today, all three of them have a problem. In two of them, that problem is insoluble. And in one of them, you can solve it if you understand time. So let me be explicit about it. Physicalism says there are only physical entities. Mind is a product of physical entities arranged in a certain way. Well, that has the insoluble, hard problem of consciousness. There is nothing about physical properties in terms of which we could deduce the qualities of experience in principle. And then you have panpsychism. There are physical entities, but they have fundamental consciousness. Electrons are conscious, quarks are conscious, photons are conscious. The problem there is the combination problem. There is no coherent way to argue that fundamentally different subjects of experience, like two electrons in your head, can combine to form a seemingly unitary experience, namely you. You can't solve that. And then you have idealism, the third option, which also has a problem. Idealism says there is only one mind and it's fundamental. So you don't have the combination problem because everything already starts combined. Everything is unitary. And you don't have the hard problem of consciousness because you don't need to produce mind. Mind is there from the beginning. Now you have the decomposition problem. How can one mind seem to be many? How can you be me while you are still you? How can Bernard be Bernardo at the same time that he's still Bernard?
Yeah.
Notice what I just said, at the same time. The problem of how can you be me at the same time that you are you presupposes a linear, unidimensional understanding of time. Because I was my 5-year-old self. It was me right there. Is that the problem? No, because my 5-year-old self is in another point in time.
Yeah.
The problem is, how can you be me at the same time?
Yeah.
That's a problem if time is only one dimension. But if it's not, if it's multi-dimension like Bernard is proposing, then you are talking to you across a different timeline.
right.
Hmm.
So
That's
time.
a very interesting notion.
Yeah. So let's recap these problems again, just to kind of get our head wrapped around that. So with materialism, the problem is going to be the hard problem of consciousness, like how you get consciousness from dumb matter or inert matter, right? And then with the panpsychism, you've got the combination problem. How do you get all these entities to combine together to create this one, unitary being? It's kind of like a unifying issue. And then with idealism, you have the decomposition problem. Like, how does this one mind, maybe localize or turn into these limited minds that are perceivers and subjective observers and things like that? And so he's saying on the latter one, the idealist thing, it's time. The understanding of time could be the issue with that. So what are your thoughts about those different problems? Like, which one is more understandable?
I personally, I believe that from a materialist or physicalist perspective, that that problem could be solved, but also, possibly from an idealist perspective. And I haven't contemplated too much from the panpsychist, but I'll have to think about that. But just really quickly, from what I think from a physicalist or materialist viewpoint, is that it could be possible that consciousness arises from a physical experience in the way that I've kind of talked about before, how one discipline or I guess layer of reality creates the next. How at the foundation of everything could possibly be mathematics, and because of the foundation laid by mathematics is enabled physics, and because of the foundation enabled by physics is enabled chemistry, and because of the foundation enabled by chemistry and the above layers enabled life, and because of the foundation of life plus all of the other layers is enabled consciousness. So it's possible that that's just a process of one layer resolving these different probabilities to create another layer, and consciousness is just that final layer that is not something easily attained, but it is a probability, and therefore by what we would call the law of infinite probability, that makes it an inevitability.
What do you think, Sophia?
I'm looking at what Joel's saying. Sorry, kind of tapped out
okay.
there.
He's saying prove the hard problem is insoluble. Well, I would say that nothing really is provable. The only thing that you have proof for is mathematics and alcohol. But
we do
that's
know
where you
that
get proof. You have
but
evidence.
we also know though that no matter how you put it, you could never explain how these brain computations create a subjective experience though.
Yeah, that's some people would call that like an argument from ignorance. Like we're kind of ignorant of how these things happen, so we don't know. And all that really tells me is we don't know. We have no solid proof one way or the other. So
I just want to know why Joel is so dead set on proving things. We're just having a conversation.
Mm. Well, he asked, well, how does mind create external objects? This is the comparable problem for idealism as to the hard problem. Call it the hard problem of external objects, if you will. In a
But look
dream,
at
you
it,
have external objects within your dream. So
and they
if you're
feel real to you.
yeah, and they're very real. You have to negotiate within the dream. There's a mechanics to the dream. You don't want to step off the cliff in the dream, because if you do, you wake up because you're dying or whatever. So the external objects thing, there is, the external is still within your consciousness, right? It's like, I mean, if you really think about it, epistemically, you only know of the external world because you're conscious of it. So you're always anchored to that. You're always stuck. You're always stuck in your consciousness. And that's where we go. So to say that there's this external world outside of consciousness is a leap of faith. You have faith that there's this external world because it seems like that within your conscious experience. But
Right, just like
why would you rely on your conscious? Why should your experience be proof of the external world that's outside of your consciousness? This is all just an abstraction, really.
But that's why I'm saying we do have evidence, because it may be circumstantial evidence, but when you go to sleep, you're still observing. You're still the observer. You're just observing a different reality from your waking life. And then when you wake up, you realize that all of that stuff in your dream was created by your mind, but it seemed to you like it was an external world, right?
Mm-hmm. So I think Joel's saying, wait, the objects of my dream are external to me. I think you need to rethink that. No, the perception, though, we're talking about the subjective experience.
As the observer of your dream, that's how you experience it. Whatever the hell is happening in your dream, as the dreamer, which is the observer, you experience it as something outside of you within that dream. Like if you're walking up to a tree in your dream, that dream is the external world of the dreamer, right?
Right, exactly. It's a category. It's not necessarily an ultimate reality, and that's what we're talking about, like the ontology, the ultimate reality. We don't know. We could all be a brain in a vat, so to speak. We don't know that, right? There's no way to disprove that or prove that one way or the other. So the only thing we have is an experience. That's the only thing we truly know. It's an inference. It's an abstraction to say that there's this reality outside of our experience that's really the real thing. We don't really know that for sure. That's the whole point.
I mean, we don't even have to say it's not real. We don't even have to deny it. But all we're saying is it's created by the mind, by your mind.
Yeah.
Which gives it still a real experience. It's still real. Your mind creates rules for that external perception or whatever, and whatever happens in there, we're just saying that you're the one who's creating it. You're the one who's writing the script for it. You're placing the objects there. You know what I mean?
Right. And Scott, I'm actually glad that you brought up what you did about inferences, because I do believe that that's important to kind of be able to wrap our minds around these concepts, is to make inferences. And sometimes I believe there are reasonable inferences to make, such as being able to say that dreams actually occur within our minds and are constructs of our minds. That's a reasonable inference, because we know from experience
that dreams occur typically, usually whenever we are sleeping, and then whenever it ends, we wake up, or we wake up ending the dream, however it may occur. But the thing about that is that it opens up other questions, because from what I've been able to gather, number one, you brought up the thing about a vat in a jar. I mean, we or a freaking
Brain in a vat.
brain in a vat. That's what I meant.
Yeah.
I would say that we are brains in a vat, and the vat is just the skull, which is at the seat of experience and knowledge of the body for the most part. You got some other like ganglia and
even
Can
your
can we
even
go can we go back to what Joel said about, we know that it's not external because other people can't access your dream? I
yeah. Did
believe
you
he
want to say
said.
something about that? Yeah, go ahead. Sure. So I've got it
Okay,
up now. He says,
so
but other minds
so
cannot access your dream objects, and that's what shows us they aren't external. Well, the dream is an analogy. It's not necessarily the same thing as what we're talking about necessarily. Because remember, under idealism, it isn't like there isn't an objective world. There is an objective world. There's observers. We're not the only mind that exists. And so it's a bit
okay,
different than a dream when we're sleeping.
but technically though, let's break it down.
Mm-hmm.
Billions of human beings cannot access the same reality at the same time either, what we consider to be objective reality. There may be a rock in Tibet that thousands of people have seen, but other people will never see it unless they go to that rock and see it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now, when you have a dream, right, and you create these objects in your dream, trees, birds, whatever, a person may not be able to access it at the same time with you, but a person can have an identical dream and see the exact same things.
Yes. And like if I look at a tree and you look at the same tree, we're not seeing the same tree. We're all
Because
seeing
you're
it
going to
from
see right, you're going to see the tree from your perspective at a different time. And when I saw it, may have had leaves. We'll never see the same tree at the same time if we're fucking somewhere across the ocean from each other,
Well, you
or
don't even have
live
to be across.
or
You don't
live
even
or
have. You
live
don't even
different
have. You don't even have to go
live
that
at
far.
a different time. Yeah.
You don't even have to go that far. You can just say me and you could stand together and look at the same tree at the same time, and we're not actually looking at the same tree, because your experience of that tree is a lot different than mine, because we're different subjects.
You may notice a tree that I didn't notice. So to you, the tree looked totally different.
Yeah.
I might see a squirrel in that tree that y'all didn't see because I'm standing a little bit over to one side.
Right. So I will refute that comment that lets us know that.
Yeah.
That it's not external.
So he says, what tells us that an object is external is that other minds can access it independently. Okay, external. Well, no one's really saying that the category of external reality doesn't exist under idealism. That's not what anybody's really saying. So it's sort of becoming a little confusing to try to help you understand what we're saying. Actually, under idealism, there is an objective world. It's just that it's all under a mind rather than based on a material thing. And these minds are local. So maybe the question is, maybe you're asking, how can you have these local minds that are able to have these shared experiences within one mind? How is that possible?
The same way that a person with dissociative identity disorder does it.
Yeah, right.
The same exact way.
what I was getting at. Yeah, go ahead and call in, Joel.
About
Let me put the
time.
link. Yeah, I'll put this link up again in case you don't want to scroll up and get it.
He's
But
had
there it
enough.
is.
He's calling in.
Good,
All
good.
right.
That's a lot easier to deal with stuff because, so yeah, so those are, getting back to it. Those are the problems. But I'd be interested to see if Joel wants to call in and we can kind of pick it up from there.
Yes, Joel, you
Before I
should
go
call. Call,
Please
call, call me now.
Call in.
Just really quickly, I wanted to take a stab at exploring these concepts from an idealist viewpoint. I'm gonna try, or I'm gonna humor it. Okay, so we talked about dreams, right? And hey, Joel.
Hey,
Hey, guys.
Joel. Nice to see you in person.
Hi.
Just let me finish my thought really quickly, and
Sure,
we'll
go
give
right
you some
ahead,
time
Alex.
to say what you got to say. Just thinking about it from what we're talking about dreams. The way I understand it, the brain is basically a modeling machine. Like we perceive with our senses, but beyond that, the brain takes the information that we perceive from our sensory organs, and it incorporates it into a model that we build in our minds. And it's the model that we use to navigate the world. That's how we can do things like walking up and down a set of stairs while we are carrying something in front of our faces that obstructs our view, because we made that model in our brain. We've traversed these stairs a number of times, and so we already have that model to be able to navigate it. So at a certain point, a certain level of experience, we don't need to see those stairs every time, because we know, we can feel the spacing of the steps. So because of things like that, because of things like dreams, we can at least humor the possibility that there could be some sort of singularity that has constructed all of reality in a similar manner that we construct models of reality from our perspective in our minds, and the way that we construct dreams.
Definitely possible. Right, Joel?
Hey, guys.
Hey,
Yo.
how's it going?
How's my audio coming through? I'm doing this for the first time.
It
Very
sounds
good,
good.
I hear
actually.
you loud and clear.
Okay, great. I've explained before, I don't have the ideal setup for this. I could have a kid or anybody come and demand my attention. But anyway, just to be clear, I'm someone who doesn't commit to any kind of ontological model as being not only being a worthwhile belief, but also as even being able to be supported rationally. Don't think that's possible that I've seen. But I always like to push back against when people try to counter that by saying it is rationally supported. So this idea about the idea that we were talking about with the hard problem, I always like to point out that I think if we're really being fair, the comparable problem on the other side is how do you get from the fundamental thing to the things that are not fundamental? That's what materialism is talking about. If material is fundamental, how do you get to consciousness, which is not? So the comparable problem on the other side has to be, how do you get from what's fundamental, consciousness, to what's not fundamental? Don't you agree, under your model, that the objects that we might refer to as physical are not fundamental? So you have to account for where they come from. So is the comparison to the dream just an analogy, or is it meant to be a claim that that's how it works?
No, I just myself personally, I humor things that I consider as possible and potentially feasible, right? So I in a lot of ways I do share your sentiments and way of thinking about things. Is that I don't commit to things to different ideologies, ontological ideologies, right away. But I will muse with just about any sort of ideology or ontology.
Yeah, well, that's why we're here, right?
Yeah.
Let's
That's why we're
muse.
here.
Yes.
Yeah, that's all it is.
No,
Let's
I
use.
understood,
I don't know.
Alex.
Should I be afraid?
Alex, I had understood that you were similar in position, that you don't accept materialism or idealism. So this was more meant to be a challenge for Scott and Sophie, especially as they either claim or play the clips of people claiming that the hard problem is unsolvable.
Well,
Of course, when I say prove if something, I don't mean tell me how much alcohol is in it. I mean, I'm using it in a colloquial sense that's just saying, give me reasonable warrant to accept this.
Evidence.
Fair. So it's always feels like a tap dance when someone says, oh, you can't prove anything. So yes, I just say, if you're going to claim that something's impossible, that we will never be able to show that consciousness could be produced from physical arrangements, then show how you know that. If you can't show how you know it, don't claim it. Don't expect it to carry any weight in the conversation for someone like me.
Well, yeah, and I would say that that's not only fair, but that's the only real, I think, rational way to go about it. Because, like I said before, I'm an agnostic on all this stuff. Ultimately, I'm an agnostic. And I always say that all the time. I don't know. But what I can do is we can compare, we can simply compare different frameworks and see which one maybe resonates with us. And a lot of this has to do with your personal, the way your mind is sort of works, sort of wired up. Some people are more left-brained, some people are more right-brained, some people are a little mix in between somewhere. But how can we compare these, and we can just go over these ideas and look at the problems each one has. As far as what you're saying about the hard problem being insoluble, it would be way too strong to say that it will never be solved under materialism. Materialism could never solve that. That would be way too strong for me to say that. But so far, we definitely have problems inherent with materialism. That's all we can really say, is that we don't really. And then two, we have evidence, though, even under, you can take like a framework and do an internal critique, right? That's another thing you can do, an internal critique, and say, well, what does materialism?
Well, the hard problem is an internal critique.
Yeah, exactly. And well, I was even going to.
But that's why I'm saying we have to look at the comparable internal critique of idealism that says, how does a consciousness, pure consciousness, create an external object that other minds could experience? That's the question. And to say, well, it just kind of does it, the mind at large just kind of does these things, is to me no more impressive than saying, well, matter, if you arrange it the right way, can produce consciousness or this or that. I mean, I think we have examples of emergent properties, like motion or locomotion is a emergent property of a physical process.
Photoreception.
Well, just to kind of answer that, so I was going to kind of get at this internal critique of materialism. Matter has no standalone existence as such, right? Like matter, if you look, like, let's,
if you can show me that. There's another claim.
Okay, here's a claim. Yeah, matter breaks down at 10 to the 33 or negative 33 centimeters. At
What do you
that
mean it
point,
breaks down?
so let's say if you're observing matter, like a piece of matter, right? And you
Okay,
hone
you're
in on
talking
it,
about
you really
zooming
take a,
in
yeah, with resolution,
on higher resolution. Okay.
high as you can get. When you get to
Hmm.
10 to the minus 33 centimeters, guess what you create? You have to create a lot of energy to get down to that resolution. Guess what you create at that point? You create a black hole. That's what materialism tells us itself. So what
So
that
let's say
means,
that's how the world works.
well, let me finish real quick.
What next?
Right, real quick.
Okay.
So when you get down to that level, uh-oh, someone's agreeing with me. Okay. So
Ouch.
all I'm asking is if matter dissolves away, like it's no longer observable at a certain point, this is called a Planck scale, by the way. Time and energy matter doesn't become observable at that point. So what's there? What is really there at that point if it's not matter and energy?
You said there was a black hole there.
Yeah, black hole. What really is a black
That's what you told me. I don't know that. That's what you
right.
told
Right.
me.
So I'm just
Can I
I'm
just
just giving
ask
you
a question,
I'm just saying,
Joe?
let's just say, well, I'd love to just quickly respond to what he said. If that's the
Go
way
ahead.
the world works, that when you look closer and closer and closer at something, eventually you see a black hole, then why is, if we're going to discover that, wouldn't we discover it regardless of what's fundamental to reality?
Right. That's not the
Like
point that I'm
whether,
making. The point, though,
okay,
that I'm making is remember, I'm doing an internal critique of materialism. So the only thing that proves,
but so
what that
far,
proves, the only thing
Mhm.
that proves is that matter cannot be the fundamental thing. Matter,
that's what I'm not
energy.
following.
Okay, can I ask you a question?
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Okay, how could we confirm matter without an observer experiencing it?
True.
Can't confirm whether it's
It
there
can't.
or not without being there to
Right.
do that.
So
So a lot
so
of
then
times,
how-
let me give you a little more. We often hear that matter from idealists that matter can't have standalone existence because we can't observe it having a standalone. And that's a big mistake in one thing not leading to the other. The fact that you can't observe something happening doesn't mean it's not happening. And so
I'm not
just
saying
like
that.
the materialist can't say,
I'm not
hey,
saying that.
okay.
I'm not saying
Scott
that. I'm
definitely
not saying
said it
that.
earlier in the program, but that's okay.
I'm not saying that. I'm saying that we don't know. So how can we go about finding out? We can't do it the way that a materialist says to do it, because if there's no observer, we can't confirm it and nobody can experience it. So
Can we find anything out without observing?
I'm sure we
No,
can.
If your question, no, we have to be able to observe something in order to learn. To discover anything, you have to observe
conscious.
something.
But
what if you?
I believe.
So if your question,
But like, if I were to turn off consciousness, like, all of a sudden, all consciousness is gone. It's an assumption to say that everything else that we perceive as matter would still be there. We don't know. So I'm just asking you.
it's a claim I'm not willing to make.
I do believe in such a
It's not a
concept
claim.
as-
I'm saying it could be there and it might not be there. What I'm asking you, though, is what do you propose how we can find out? What approach should we take?
I don't propose that we can find out. I'm pointing out to you that when you ask, how do we know what happens when no one's looking, when there is no observer, when there's no consciousness left to learn or observe, my answer is that's a non-starter. It's just an NA. There is no such thing as doing that, which is partly why I take the position I do on ontology. You can't get to an answer by doing these things. So why pick an answer?
Well,
I'm not.
I believe
there's
I
a few
believe in
reasons
this
why you can do that.
concept called logical inferences. You know, there are certain things that we may never be able to prove conclusively, but I believe that we can make logical inferences about what is most likely the case.
Yes. So give me a logical inference for an ontological model, and we can't observe what happens when we're not observing is not a logical inference for an ontological model. It just doesn't get you there. Neither does we can't solve the problem of the hard problem of consciousness. Neither does we can't solve the comparable problem of how external objects would be created. None of those things get you to the other conclusion. They just can't.
So we're at a standstill, right?
But we know that matter
Mm-hmm.
matter doesn't exist beyond 10 to the 33 centimeters. We know that.
I don't know that that's the conclusion. It didn't even sound like that's what you said the first time you explained it. But either way, even if for some reason we have this limitation where we can't see it, it's still there at the level we're looking at it. The fact that we zoomed in on it doesn't make the thing that's there disappear out of reality, does it? Like, let's say we start with a bowling ball, and then we zoom in and we zoom in and we zoom in until we were at that really high level you were talking about. And you say, oh, well, now when we look through the microscope, we're just seeing a black hole. But what do we see when we see the bowling ball? Still there, right? It didn't disappear.
Right. But what I'm saying
the
is
fact that
go ahead.
Like, we were surprised to find a lot of empty space inside of atoms, right? The subatomic particles are tiny compared to the fields that they take up, right? So that was weird when we found that out. And I'm saying the fact that we find weird stuff at the level you're talking about, or when people bring up quantum things, I have a similar reaction. Okay, it's weird. You said it was an internal critique of materialism, but it seems to me that all you're doing is pointing to something about reality, and you're saying this is true about reality. So that means it's something that either model would have to account for. Why would a object created by a mind for things like you and me to experience break down at that level into a black hole? Does it make more sense in your model? I haven't heard any explanation.
Well, it makes sense to the universe is what it is, number one. I mean, I think we can all agree with that. Are you familiar with Nima Arkani Ahmed?
No.
Okay. So he's a Nobel Prize winning physicist, theoretical physicist. Him and a lot of others have also come to this conclusion. There's a book out there called Space-Time is Doomed. So what that is it's kind of highlighting that issue that at a certain point at the Planck scale, time, space, matter, energy breaks down. And so what they've done is a lot of clever investigations, experiments, mathematical equations to kind of show that there's something immaterial beyond what we call the physics, the matter, the energy, things of that nature. And this is based on, an internal critique of those things. So what I'm proposing isn't really anything new, right? It's not really, we've known about this for about 100 years, right? Ever since quantum mechanics. And you might say, well, okay, so if matter isn't the thing that reality is founded on, then why is it consciousness? Well, because I would rather go with something more parsimonious, meaning I would rather introduce something that we know exists rather than some unknown property, just make some imaginary property up and say that this explains it. Well, I don't have this unknown thing. That's why it's unknown. We know matter can't be the thing. The only thing left is the other side, the other aspect, the other side of the coin of reality, which is the subjective. And I would just say, why don't we look at possibly that being the the substance of
Well, you say
reality.
it's the only other.
There's
in terms of
unknowns.
the categories that we know of, and not introducing a new category, which is important for parsimony. Take all that into account, and then acknowledge that there could still be an answer that we don't know about. There could still be a category that we don't know about. It could still be what is fundamental. It doesn't make sense to say because we've ruled out materialism, therefore idealism. Doesn't make sense.
I would lean that way. I wouldn't say it necessarily.
But you sound like you're not even willing to explore the other side of it. That's my issue with you, because you.
Well, I thought we were here to muse.
But you just have wishful. You just have wishful thinking. You just saying, well,
sorry,
one day.
What's wishful?
Wishful thinking, like you're saying that one day materialists will be able to somehow prove it, but.
I'll be a little charitable.
Sorry, Sophie.
I'll be charitable with Joel. Let me be charitable and say.
Wait, let him answer. Let him answer, please.
Okay, go right ahead.
He's about to scold me.
I thought I was going to point, like Brady Bunch. Yeah, Scott. No, Sophie, I didn't say that. I said that I often hear idealists claim that the problem of hard consciousness can't be solved, and what I said was, if you think you can show that no one will ever solve the problem of hard consciousness from a materialist standpoint, then you need to show me how you know that. Now, that's not me making a claim. That's just me challenging someone else's claim.
Right.
Okay, well, right. I'm not making that claim.
Now, I'm careful. I'm sorry. Yeah, like I said, that's something I often hear from idealists. If you're careful not to make that claim, that's great. Do you think the hard problem is solvable or unsolvable, or just we don't know?
I'm saying we don't know. As of right now, we ain't got there yet. You know what I mean?
Well, if we don't know, then how can it push us in either direction in terms of what ontological model we think is true? If we don't know, it may be...
Me personally, because I'm a mystic and I have mystical experiences, and that's all I have as a human being. So the other side of it explains the things that happen to me, whereas materialism doesn't. So for me personally,
how does it explain that, Sophie?
For example, quantum mechanics explains why I may have what some would call psychic experiences. Quantum mechanics would actually explain why that is, whereas materialism cannot at the moment, at least. So me personally,
well, wait.
Think about it. Like if you had a disability, right, and you don't know why you function the way that you do, but it's different from everybody else, you're going to want answers to why you are the way that you are, right? So if I've already tried that avenue to see what the hell is wrong with me and I can't find answers in that field, and then I see that and say, oh, wow, that sounds exactly like what's happening to me. So maybe they're onto something. So that's my personal reason as to why I'm leaning more towards the idealist view. You see what I'm saying?
I appreciate that reasoning. I would push back on it, but I'm trying to think of how it really responds to what we were saying. I asked you if you thought that if you agree with me that the problem of the hard problem of consciousness is we don't know whether it's solvable or not, then
because I'm
how
alive,
can that be raised as support for either conclusion?
Well, I'm not saying that. I'm just saying I'm alive right now, and I'm looking for answers right now for my subjective experience. And so at the moment,
do you want true answers, or do you want any answers?
No, I don't want any answers, because why would I want that? Materialism.
Right. Same for me. I want true answers.
Right. But
well, that's why I act the way I do about this. That's why I'm so particular in giving these pushbacks, is because I don't want to just accept any old thing. I want true answers, or at least reasonable ones. If we can't demonstrate what's true, we can at least say, well, this is well supported.
So you don't think quantum mechanics? is
can
a
I
real
still
study? You
can I
don't you don't think that quantum
No,
mechanics is
I just don't appreciate you conflating quantum mechanics with support for idealism. I don't accept that that's the case. It's similar to what Scott was talking about with the zooming in on physical objects. The fact that the world is that way, quantum mechanics is what it is, to me doesn't point to either anything about what's fundamental to reality. If you could explain to me how you think it connects or points,
So
I'd be interested. But
at this stage of the game, at this point of the argument, right? Like the one that I mentioned about resolving down to a particular level, that mass, matter, energy, all that stuff sort of becomes unobservable at a certain point, right? Does that kind of demonstrate to you that matter as we understand it probably isn't, or doesn't seem to be, the fundamental I don't know what's the word,
substance.
substrate or substance of reality? If
No,
matter
that's
breaks down as we understand it, what does that tell you?
it doesn't tell me anything in terms of what's fundamental. If you say,
Right.
well, the fact that it breaks down means that it can't be fundamental, well, then again, I would be interested in clarifying what we mean by it breaks down, as opposed to we stop being able to observe it. The idea that our abilities might be limited should be a much bigger option on the table than there's nothing there. Now that we can't see anything, there's nothing there. Along the same lines, okay, go ahead.
I was going to ask you, so when we talk about things that are real, right? How do you define reality? Like something that's real?
I have a very open interpretation or meaning for the word reality, because, like, for me, something can be real if it were, not that I would claim it was, but if it were that ontological foundation, then it could be real in that way. If it's created by the effects of or arrangements of the fundamental thing, then that's also real. An example I like to point to is for that even things can be real on a conceptual level to me. Like, for instance, a unicorn is a real concept.
So, but I mean,
unicorns.
Like, okay,
Mhm.
so you're saying that a real thing. So if I told you that I saw a unicorn, a magical rainbow farting
Oh,
unicorn,
this getting crazy.
would you say that that was a real thing I saw?
The issue that I have there, you sound like when you say you saw it, the way that you might see a horse tromping down the street outside of your house. I would say that doesn't fit with my view of reality.
Right.
If you said I saw it in my head,
why is that?
Why is my past experience important and what I accept as true?
No. Why would you think or lean towards my claim that I saw a rainbow farting unicorn? Why would you say that? Why would you lean towards that not being real?
Oh. As I was explaining it, the way in which it's not real or unlikely to be real by my experience is the way of like I was talking about, an external object, right? Mm-hmm. Like in the way that a horse is real or my dog is real.
So in other words,
those kinds of things.
I'll help you out.
That's different from saying that that we have a real concept for a unicorn.
Right.
Concepts are real. We can experience concepts
as
right,
concepts,
and
right.
so, so they are part of the set of objects that we interact with.
Okay.
So they're real to me.
So there's
just layers of reality.
Layers, right? Let's use the word layers. So there's a layer of reality where unicorns are actually real because they're real as concepts.
Not where they are real. They're just that layer is a conceptual layer, and it contains all the concepts that are real. All the concepts that people have ever had could be contained there. It's just a set. It's just a category.
Right. So in a way, you could say idealism is real and materialism is real because they're all
Well, they're all real
concepts.
concepts.
They're all real
But if I were like, well, what
But
about
what we're talking about?
what about boobity-boobity-dism?
Right.
If I said, well, what about boobity-boobity-dism? And you'd be like, is that a real concept? Yeah, well, there's nothing in reality to match it with. So that's
So
why,
basically,
we
you're
could
talking
contrive
about
it.
what somebody thinks is real, but beyond that, it's not, right?
I'm
Anybody
saying
can think.
that our
Anybody
thoughts.
can think.
I'm saying Scott was asking me about my interpretation of reality and what I mean by reality, and I'm saying I have a wide interpretation that includes a range of things where things can be real. They can be
Gotcha.
real in this way, or they can be real in this way.
Gotcha.
That's not there are important distinctions between those things.
What is the other way besides conceptual? What other realities are we talking about that you adhere to?
Well, the things that I was talking about being external, I think it clearly go beyond the conceptual level. They have a different status clearly than my thoughts.
Your imagination, right? So here we go. So there's imaginary things that are real as imaginary things, and then there's this other status of reality that isn't your imagination that you can actually observe, right? Externally. Is that what you're saying?
Well, I experience both things. I think the real tell that I was speaking about in the chat earlier is can you experience it independently of me? If you and I can both independently experience an object, then that object must be external to me. If it's internal to me, like my thoughts or my concepts that just pop into my head and I don't express to you, then that's a clear way to tell external objects from internal objects.
Okay.
And I think earlier someone said, well, we don't think external objects exist under idealism. Well, you have to acknowledge that some objects that you experience are independently accessible by others. That's what I mean when I say that things are external.
Okay. So would you say that matter at 10 to the 33 centimeters or the Planck scale, would you say that matter is imaginary at that point?
I'm having to imagine it in order to engage with this because I don't experience that. So I have never experienced that.
Thought experiment. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Use your imagination, right?
Yeah. If you could look into an electroscopic microscope or whatever, and you and other observers, which has been done, this is what people claim. A lot of scientists claim this for 100 years. That when they drill down, they resolve down to 10 to the minus 33 centimeters, and that matter is no longer there. There's nothing there. At that point, since everyone is observing that fact and has agreed on that fact in science, would you say that matter becomes imaginary at 10 to beyond that? Or do you think that matter just is nothing, that there's nothing there? What would you do?
I'm saying if we find out that matter is made up of black holes, then that's just something about matter for us to learn. It's not. It doesn't tell us anything.
Can I read something real quick about that?
Go ahead.
Atomic and subatomic breakdown. Atoms are 99.99999% empty space. What we call solid matter is mostly vacuum. Inside the atom, protons, neutrons, and electrons are not solid objects. They behave more like probabilistic waves. Did I say that right, y'all? Than tiny billiard balls. This already destroys the idea of solid standalone matter. Would you agree with that?
I accept most of it except for the little throw-on conclusion there. What are you reading from?
I asked the handy dandy chat GPT.
Yeah.
And
Well, especially if you ask it to give you arguments, in light of or in support of
I just asked it a
idealism, I
question.
think you get those kinds of answers.
No, I just asked it a general question.
Yeah.
I asked
Google knows
how,
your ontological model, Sophie.
I just asked
you
how
better.
far. No, I just asked how
Yeah.
far does matter break down. I mean, we can scratch the little commentary at the end, but if it completely
Yes.
breaks down at that level, you know what I'm saying?
Again, what does breakdown mean? What does breakdown mean exactly?
It means unobservable.
Unobservable.
So we can't observe it, or we can tell that there is no way to observe it. Which one of those things are we saying about it?
In principle, there's no way to observe it. In principle.
Which principle?
Right.
It's theoretical physics.
I don't understand it.
It's
if you can explain it to me, I'm willing to listen. But
I mean, I would invite
I know that theoretical physics is a pretty deep subject.
Yeah, and I'd rather
it's a lot to hang your hat on. These ideas that are very hard to understand seem like a lot to hang your hat on when it comes to accepting a conclusion, to me.
Well, it's not that. I don't think it's that complicated, really. I mean, it's pretty. I mean, if you look at it in terms of understanding it inside and out, everything is complicated. The theory of evolution is complicated. Does that mean that I hang my hat on something complicated like the theory of evolution to make the claim that we evolved from lower primates? I mean, to me, it's not that hard to understand. I mean,
it wasn't that it was complicated.
I mean, you'd be right. It would be a very complicated thing to explain to someone who wasn't familiar with that.
People are capable. Sorry,
people are capable.
Wow.
Yeah, and that's what I'm getting at. Is I think it's not that controversial. Let's put it that way. The Planck scale is pretty common knowledge, at least within scientific circles. So all I'm really.
But again, you're saying that the observations that are being made are not controversial. It's the conclusions that you're drawing from it that I'm saying. I don't know how widely those are being drawn.
Those are debatable. What I'm saying is those are debatable. Absolutely. And that's why we have the discussion. That's why we have the channel, so we can actually debate about it and talk about it.
Well, so here's a question. Do you guys want to keep talking about science that's really, really complicated and possibly, just going to be beyond me? Or do you accept that if I can't understand something, it can't be logical reasoning for me to accept the conclusion?
I accept what you just said, but I mean, obviously that's your take on it, and that's your conclusion that if you can't really understand what we're trying to say, because it's maybe theoretical physics is complicated. But to me, I'm just making a very simple point that and I'm not inviting you to believe anything. I'm just saying if under the framework, if matter, energy, mass, all of that stuff becomes nothing, like a black hole, and nothing, a true void of nothing,
signals,
right? Just a probability distribution is actually what it boils down to. If it comes to that, then I mean, if that was the case, wouldn't you say that matter isn't fundamental? Could you rule that out? I mean, I'm not saying we're not jumping the gun. I'm not jumping the gun to say that this means. Wait. I'm not jumping the gun now. Just to let you know, I'm not saying at this point this proves God, or this proves idealism, or this proves, bluely blue. Okay? I'm not saying that. I'm just saying at this point.
I'm clear. You just want to know if I agree if it's an issue.
Yeah. Would it be
for materialism?
Would it be a challenge? Right. Would it be a challenge?
Okay. I can't see how it would be. And what I would want to know is if you were, again, using your imagination to imagine a world where material is fundamental, but when you zoom in on it, it disappears into a black hole. What's impossible about that?
There's no contradiction, so it's possible.
Okay. So it's not a problem for materialism that material that we can't observe it below a certain resolution or
Well, it's
whatever.
well, we have plausible things, and we have, anything's possible in the magical kingdom, right?
Mm.
So I mean, you can say anything's possible. I don't care about what's possible. I care about what's probably
Yeah, no,
true.
I was asking if you could rule it out, though. You're treating it as if something.
You could never rule anything out totally. That's what we get back to alcohol and proof numbers. Are you familiar
well,
with
again,
Gödel's theorem? Gödel's theorem? Do you know about that one?
If it's a German name,
Yeah. So there's
I might have read it without knowing how to pronounce it.
There is this proof. This is a proof. It's called a theorem, not a theory, but it's a theorem. And basically what it says is that any framework that you set out to prove can never be proven, because there's always a boundary. There's always a demarcation to the theory, and every good theory will define its limitations. It will always define where it breaks down and can no longer prove itself. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's called Gödel's theorem. So nothing can really be proven at all. Like everything, every framework only makes sense within the framework. But once you get to the boundary conditions of the framework, you have to now introduce another framework to explain that framework, and it goes on and on and on and on forever. So
yeah, well, that partly sounds like the issue that we all have with basic beliefs, that any conclusions that we reach are necessarily going to be based on priors, and at some point all of us have axiomatic things that need to be assumed in order to get to any conclusion.
Yeah, it's always an assumption.
But it also sounds like, did you say Gödel? He is talking about that kind of very strict interpretation of proof that you were saying. We only have it for alcohol and mathematical things. And again, that's not what we're talking about when we're talking about reaching reasonable conclusions.
Right.
So
yeah. So, and if that's the case, if we can accept,
can we circle back? Go ahead. The challenge was when you bring up this thing about looking really closely at matter and it breaking down, as you say, and I asked you what's impossible about imagining a world where material is fundamental, but when we look closely at enough, it seems to break down. And I said, what's impossible about that? Well, you said, well, nothing's impossible. Anything's possible. And
as long as it's not a contradiction.
Yeah, well, so then, matter producing consciousness isn't impossible. Anything's possible. Mm-hmm. If we're going to address problems like that, they're easy to solve. You know what I mean? So you can't start with the hard problem and be like, this is really hard, and then get to a problem with your argument and say, well, anything's possible.
Oh, no. I'm applying it equally. I'm definitely applying it equally. That's the only logical thing to do. But what I'm saying is, if you take any framework, you try to compare different frameworks for explaining anything, like say consciousness or whatever, what we can do is we can have a guide. Like for me, it would be like with my epistemology is to make the less amount of assumptions as possible, and not introducing unknowns if we can. Now, let me tell you another thing. Let me go ahead and give you this caveat. This should make you happy too. Parsimony isn't a hard, fast rule of reality, okay? Take fluid dynamics. In fluid dynamics, people wondered, well, what about the flow of liquid? What's the most parsimonious hypothesis we could say about that? And it's like, well, the molecules all flow in one direction. And that's why we see water flowing in one direction. Pretty simple, right? Well, as it turns out, actually it's a lot more fucking complicated than that, because we have different molecules going in different directions all over the place. And so it's not really that parsimonious as it turns out. And it's the same thing with, say, using air molecules. Say before we understood what air is, and we say, well, we have to, actually air is made up of trillions and trillions and trillions, countless numbers of air molecules. Well, how parsimonious is that? But actually that's true, right? So
Yeah.
parsimony isn't necessarily a hard, fast rule of how reality works. All it really is a guide
It's a guiding principle.
for looking at things like what we're talking about, you know, different
And
frameworks.
if I could add, can I tack something on there?
Yeah.
If you look at it, what you'll find is that it's a guiding principle for choosing which hypothesis to pursue. A hypothesis isn't a conclusion, and it's testable. So if you're leaping to a conclusion that you can't test based on parsimony, then I think you're abusing the principle. But that's my take on it.
Yeah, could be. And you know, if you were to ask me, why do you lean towards idealism rather than materialism, I would say that it was a couple of those things. It kind of like what Sophia was saying about, we all have a subjective mystical experience of living, experiencing things. You know, not that little argument of ignorance comes up. Like, we have this experiential reality that materialism, just on many definitions, just doesn't entail, right? But beyond that, I would say that even on materialism, when you do reductionist science, materialist reductionist sort of science, you see that matter breaks down at a certain level. So instead of me introducing something like multiverses, which could very well explain that, I mean, that's what Sean Carroll says, the explanation for the Planck scale is obvious to him. There's like multiple infinite universes out there, and that's why, you know, you have probabilities of states of actualization, when you know, the measurement problem, the observer issue. All of these things can be accounted for by, you know, infinite universes. But that's not very parsimonious. Not saying that it's not true, but it just seems like some sort of I can't even think of the word, some sort of explanation for reality as we experience it should be as parsimonious as possible if we're going to go down that rabbit hole of trying to understand what we believe at this, or what seems to be the best hypothesis going in. I'm like that. I just like parsimony. I don't want to introduce a lot of points of failure in the theory, you know? I don't know. Sophia, what do you think, Alex?
Let me bring up something really quickly. We could talk about how some people have this condition called aphantasia, where they are not able to, like, on demand, like construct a visual model in their brain. Right? So because somebody has aphantasia and they can't on demand construct visual models in their brain, does that therefore mean that people in general, nobody can construct visual models in their brain? No, it's just that person with aphantasia cannot. So possibly other people can. So in that same regard, just because, you know, I mean, from what I'm aware, most people do not have the capacity to be able to have experiences like Sophia has had in her life of having these experiences that can be described as like premonitions or
That's because we're like Jesus on the cross. We have to go through immense pain and suffering. Something like that has to happen to our essence, and it kind of kickstarts that. There's a correlation between that has been, you know, identified, a pattern. So people like us, you know, not saying it in an arrogant way, we suffer on a whole nother level to even, you know, have those experiences.
Yeah, that's what people, when they achieve that higher spectrum that we were kind of looking at, a lot of that is based on trauma. Some of it's based on coming like really near death, you know,
Yeah,
coming
the
through really
threshold of
bad.
revelation, Alex. Remember?
oh yeah, yep.
But I wanted to also, because we spent a lot of time talking about consciousness, so I wanted to kind of shift gears a little bit.
Hey, I like this
And thanks,
discussion.
yeah, and
Where
thanks,
did it go?
yeah, no, thanks, Joel, for coming in, man. I don't know if you got your signal dropped out or whatever. I don't know what happened, but you could always feel free to jump back in if you want. I really enjoy. Oh, here he is. He says, "Hey, I accidentally dropped out, but it's a good time for me to get back to the family. Thanks for letting me give my take. It was fun. I thought so too, man. Thanks a lot. Very intelligent
Yes,
dude.
appreciate it, and it makes it all the more interesting.
Absolutely, man. And we always want to invite different challenges, and we're just challenging you back. That's all. We just like to do that because it's how we do it, you know. But I wanted to kind of switch gears and get into the because I said on the, you know, the heading of the show, we talk about paranormal stuff. So I was talking a lot about the telepathy tapes, which I find very fascinating. And I kind of wanted to show a few videos on this so that people have an idea of what we're talking about here. So this is a scientist who has something to say about the telepathy tapes themselves. Let me go ahead and get this going.
Yeah. Now, on the other hand, you know, some of the things that some of the critics don't necessarily talk about as much, is there were instances like Akil, who I think was focused on in episode 2, I think, and he types independently on a keyboard, and so there's footage of him and there's experiments with him where he's on the totally opposite other end of the room with his own keyboard, typing it in himself.
Let's please multiply 2 numbers and see if he gets it.
Okay, what is it?
9 0 0.
Unbelievable.
And it's kind of like, okay, so nobody's holding a letterboard, you know, and even some of the experiments that I was involved in, we had set up a 2-computer synchronized test scenario where the sender, the mom usually, receives some sort of a cue, whether it's random numbers or a word or something. And then the receiver, the non-speaker, has to input their response. And of course, they're on opposite ends of a table. There's no way they can see each other's computers. And when we did that test, actually, because, you know, the mom is on the opposite side, so she's not holding the letterboard. But when we did that, you know, the non-speaker we were working with is not particularly adept at using a keyboard. So we had somebody else hold the letterboard that didn't know any of the numbers, any of the letters. They weren't seeing the cue. And so that way, this was Houston. So Houston could respond on the letterboard, and then it was typed in by the person helping, but neither of them had seen any of the cues. You know, they couldn't see the other computer. So, you know, we do have some tests where at least that element was really controlled for. And so, you know, it doesn't get as much attention, but, you know, we've seen that data. We need more of that kind of data.
Cool, man. So here's the demonstration that a lot of people look for. If you look into the telepathy, I invite everybody who's interested in this kind of stuff to actually look at the telepathy tapes, to look at the actual experiments and the things that were done. It's pretty fascinating. And this guy was a scientist who actually saw that. And there's others, of course. I'm just playing one video there. Now, The other thing I want to say is that under some version of idealism, telepathy would actually debunk idealism under some interpretations of idealism. Because remember, the minds, the local minds, are supposed to be disassociated from each other. So if you're disassociated, how is it that they're able to read minds and see what's going on? That's the part that's confusing to me, though, on idealism. Some, I know Bernardo
Now
Kastrup said,
ask that question again. Let me
like,
ponder that for a second.
right. So on idealism, you know, the explanation for why we have local minds, we have limited minds, and then we have the cosmic mind, or the mind of idealism, right? And we're all disassociated, right? We're limited. In other words, I don't know what's going on in the Andromeda star system. I don't know what's going on within Alex's subjective experience at any time, because we're all disassociated from each other, right?
Yeah.
Right.
So if that principle is true, if that's how this idealism is supposed to work, then how do we explain the fact that these kids can actually read other people's minds?
Well, that's because, take, for example, a person with dissociative identity disorder. And let's say they have 20 different personalities, and each alter ego is not aware of the next one, and so on and so forth. And the singular mind where it's coming from, which is you, is also not aware.
Mm-hmm.
So what happens is you bring in another observer, which we call a therapist. The therapist brings these alters to your attention, and the therapist is also a construction from the mind. So basically, there's always another observer. A fractured mind could basically see multiple things at the same time, but each, personality doesn't know until it is reconciled back to itself. You see what I'm saying? So these children somehow went through that reconciliation process.
And notice that one of the commonalities, they're all autistic and they all cannot speak. So there's something about that correlates to possibly to what you're talking about then.
It could be because they're using different senses, which makes them more powerful in another sense. Kind of like what materialists argue, if a certain part of your brain is damaged, then you make up for it with another part in your brain. And so, something like that.
So that leads me to the question. I was going to ask Alex this question. So on materialism, if this is true, then how would materialism explain? Because on materialism, you're not supposed to have this kind of precognition or mind reading, telepathy. But if materialism actually is true, and it actually is true that this telepathy is going on, then how do you think we could resolve that square?
I mean, I don't see how. I don't.
Hypothetically,
be creative. Try to be as creative as you can.
Well, let Alex take a shot. He's the more rational one.
Take a shot, Alex.
All right. Here's my shot. I think that hypothetically, it could be an emergent property that is, basically like a new or an improved ability of the consciousness within the brain to be able to model an experience that is being had by another individual based on the bond that one has, like
so an entanglement.
One has gathered so much data and is able to accurately model another individual that one is familiar with to a certain degree.
That sounds like some Again, though, that sounds like dissociative identity disorder in a way, because at that point, oh well, maybe antisocial personality disorder, because at that point you're just mimicking.
Well, it's not just mimicking. Like I said, it's modeling, and that's something
Which
that
is mimicking.
as far settle down,
If
dog.
you model if
Right.
you model something to resemble something else in the same way, like that's
So you're
mimicking.
saying the same thing. Yeah, okay.
No,
Yeah.
well, I wouldn't say it's mimicking so much as it is like literally copying, and it's like a simulation or an emulation.
But
That's
if
what it
it's
would be.
based on the information that it learned from other organisms and then models itself or duplicates
But wait a minute.
itself.
Wait. Something's not making sense though about that. And the
Mhm.
reason why it's probably better if I show the video
Go ahead.
to actually show you what I mean here. Hold on, let me set this up, because what you're saying is a little different than what the experiments are really bearing out. So I want to make sure we all understand what's going on. Hold on a second here.
What the hell is happening here?
What the hell is wrong with you people? Are you stupid? What are you, stupid? Dumb question. Dumb question.
The people that would be most likely to exhibit it would be nonverbal autistic children. And it turns out that I might be right. The video you're looking at shows the experimental setup we had last spring. Haley, a 10-year-old severely autistic child, and her therapist are seated alone in the room, together at a table and separated by a tall partition that prevents eye-to-eye or physical contact. Cards with randomized numbers, words, sentences, pictures, and equations were hidden until the experiment. The therapist viewed them one by one on her side of the visual barrier and then asked Haley what she was thinking or looking at. Haley pointed with her wooden pencil inside characters on stencils with her right hand to select them, and then entered them with her left into a device that converts text to speech. You'll notice that there are no characters for division signs, equal signs, or decimal points, so the therapist had to tell Haley when these occurred. You'll also notice that her answer is 100% accurate on 18 out of 18 digits. This is just one of 10 equations that she did in a 10-minute period, with accuracy above 90% each time.
Man, that is crazy.
So the problem that I see with what Alex you just said is you're saying that it's sort of like a modeling thing. But how can modeling get you 100% accuracy though?
To me, that seems more like these kids are literally transcending time and space as we know it. And they think of it like this, like you have a straight line and you're on that line, right?
Yeah.
And what was in the past is a memory, and what's in the future you can't see. So all you see is what's right now, right? But it seems like these children are above that line, looking down from above, and they can see it all.
Mm-hmm. Like a remote viewing thing.
Like a remote viewing thing, and that's what
Kinda
some people.
Okay.
Yeah,
that makes sense. That makes sense. Okay. That kind of makes sense.
The fact that they're nonverbal, they're probably using their brain completely differently. You know what I'm saying? Not based on language, they communicate differently.
So Paul Massell's out there. Hey folks, how's it going? He says, Paul, can you call in, man, and give me your take on how this squares with idealism? Because I know you're an idealist, and I'm not sure if you believe this stuff or not on idealism, or if you do, I'm not sure what your version of idealism would say. I kind of suspect you wouldn't believe this, But I mean, the data's there. I mean, the evidence seems to be there. I mean, they could all be conspiring to lie to us, but I just don't believe that. I'm going to be gracious and grant that they're saying that the outcomes of the experiment are what they are. And if they are that
No,
way,
because
that is the
we,
truth.
we definitely have information that points to the existence of individuals who are called autistic savants,
To
who
do other
have
things, yeah.
an extraordinary capacity for processing different things, such as mathematics, such as being
But
able
it,
to memorize explicit details of their surroundings, to, I mean, what
but
can only
again,
be described as autistic detail.
it does seem as if these children are transcending space and time. Take my uncle, for example. He was autistic, and he had this thing that he did, and nobody could understand how the hell he did it. You could tell him any random date, walk up to him out of nowhere, and say, Uncle Derek, what day was January 23rd in 1923? And it wouldn't even take him a millisecond to say Tuesday. And then I would go to Google and I would type that in and see if that's true, and it's true. So either he had automatically, innately figured out the, I don't know, the format, the mathematical format for that, or he literally was able to perceive the past. Like, I don't know. It's wild. May he rest in peace, because he passed away after he got vaccinated. But he was also almost nonverbal. Like, he did speak, but he would only say like yes or no, and stuff like that. But he couldn't really say sentences, and he was, for the most part, silent. So it just seems that
I have an idea. So what I propose is you said something that caught my attention.
Can I just before you
Go
answer,
ahead,
can I just get you to consider this one thing? Mind you, he couldn't read. He never read a book. None of that. So he doesn't know anything about a calendar or none of that. Keep that in mind.
So I'm not sure if that was necessarily true, that he couldn't read. Maybe he could, but he didn't really have a reason to. But I'm not saying that is necessary for him to understand that either. What you said earlier is, you said, how could he, could he have innately understood that? And I believe that actually is very plausible, that it was an innate understanding, therefore it is intuitive, right? The way that a person who has a mind like that, the way that their brain works, from my understanding, is that they have an intuitive understanding, that they don't have
Okay, but
to
where does that intuition come from? What information does that intuition tap into? That's what I'm asking. Because if he wasn't, he didn't read, he couldn't read, and he never read, and that was found out when he was a kid, and he just did. He couldn't read.
Maybe he could, but he just refused to. He had no purpose for it. But I don't know if that necessarily has any relevance, because
the point is,
that is not necessary to explain.
It has some relevance, because if the calendar, right, is a man-made concept, right? Because there's
different. At the same time, calendars only cover a year, maybe like a few years max.
But
and so,
there are different calendars.
I mean, he could have figured out a pattern without even necessarily having to look at a calendar, just knowing, you know, that there are 365 days in a year, 366 on a leap year, right? That's how we divide our years into
But
days.
how does he know all of that when he didn't even learn that? He couldn't even. He didn't have an education. He didn't go to
Right.
school.
Well,
So there's
just
a
because he
condition.
didn't have a regular formal education doesn't mean that he didn't educate himself. And I think that he probably
He was born.
picked
He was
up
born
on
during.
a lot of
He
things without people noticing that he explicitly,
he
or
was
they
born.
explicitly verified that he learned that thing.
He was born during a time where Black people were extremely uneducated. Most Black people couldn't read. And he grew up with my aunt, who was herself extremely uneducated. So he wasn't around education whatsoever. He wasn't exposed to education. And there wasn't even any internet until he was well into his maybe 20s, which he never used. The only thing that he ever did is sit in a room and stare.
Well, there's an easy answer to that question in the form of a video. Yay! It's called acquired savant syndrome, and this is scientific. It's not even controversial. So this may answer the question, and it kind of goes along with what Sophia was just talking about. But let me play a little bit of this.
United States, who, like many other boys, enjoys doing sports. He and his friends spent many afternoons playing baseball while chatting and having fun. What he didn't know was that this activity would change his life forever. One afternoon, he was hit in the head with a baseball. After a few seconds, he regained his consciousness and got back up. He didn't tell his parents about the incidents and developed a headache over the next weeks. But eventually the headache stopped and the boy nearly forgot what has happened. Soon, however, he realized that he gained incredible abilities. He could remember the numbers and letters of car licenses very easily, could recite long texts, and could remember each detail about individual days. When his family realized that the boy had these new abilities, they went to see a doctor. After inquiring about the accident, the doctor ran some tests and it became clear. Orlando had savant syndrome. Savant syndrome is a condition that gives people incredible but narrow talents. My name is Gavin Steinig, and today we'll talk about savant syndrome and how seemingly ordinary people suddenly become extraordinary.
So the video just goes on to talk about different examples. Like some people become math wizards. Like they were horrible at math, just like me, just terrible at it. And then all of a sudden they get in a car accident or something, and then all of a sudden they can solve any equation. People can test them with a calculator, and what's cajillion 5 times cajillion 60 or whatever, and they'll come up with an answer that's right on the spot, perfect, in a matter of seconds. Like they become a computer. So there's other people that become great pianists, piano players. There's some people that couldn't read or write. Yeah, they couldn't read or write, and then all of a sudden they get into an accident or something happens and they can read and write and understand languages out of the blue. Like, what is that? And how does that fit in with really materialism, idealism, anything? But I guess
my uncle was like that since he was born, I guess, and he didn't have an accident, but he definitely must have had that same syndrome. But to me personally, it just seems that there's either some type of computation that takes place that is as fast as the speed of light, or there is, which to me that just doesn't explain how. Basically, what I'm saying is, when you're a kid, you're not aware of things until you're exposed to those things and you can observe them, right? So everything that you learn based on what you've been shown, what's around you, what you've been told, whatever you computate in your mind is based on the things that you've observed. Now, when you take one of those people, though, it's like they weren't even exposed to certain things and they know everything about it at the speed of light. Like how? To me, that suggests that they are tapping into some type of quantum field or something,
Mm-hmm.
where the information already exists, but not in the way that, we tangibly perceive it from our subjective experience in the world of what we call material world matter, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's almost like they get their information from what some refer to as the Akashic records, or the ether, where all information was and always will be. Like they're
Yeah.
tapping into a universal library of mental thought and concepts or something. you know
Well, there's a field called transgenerational biology, and it's where they talk about it's the biology of heritable memories. Like even I think they did an experiment. Well, they did it with rats, and they also did it with humans, where humans who had grandparents or great grandparents that suffered in Auschwitz in Germany went through a lot of trauma, and then that trauma was passed down to their children and children's children, to where certain things would freak them out that the grandparents picked up through their experience of being in Auschwitz. Same thing with rats. They had rats where every time they went for this particular thing, they would get an electric shock. Every time they went for this particular thing, they didn't. So the brats learned to not go for the thing that shocks them and go for the thing that doesn't shock them, right? And then they had great grandkids, mice, from separated by a couple generations, that still remembered that. They still remembered not to go for the thing that shocks them when they didn't have any personal experience of that trauma.
And as far as we know of, they also don't have the language to communicate that explicitly.
Right. And so now we've got all of these examples.
that would suggest that there's something like, I guess, cellular memory.
Right, but what I'm saying is, if we're all disassociated, then how is that supposed to be possible? Like, I don't know, maybe
Because disassociation doesn't mean that you are not a part of the singularity. It just means you're not perceiving it. There's some type of barrier or like mental separation going on, but it doesn't mean that there isn't still something that connects you to the singularity. You know what I'm saying?
or
Like
to each other's experience, not even the singularity, but even to, like, let's say, Sophia, you had an experience where, I don't know, you had an accident, now you're scared of heights. You'll never be on top of a high building again or whatever. And then for some reason, all your grandkids are the same way. Like, how did they learn that? You didn't tell them that. You didn't, teach them that. They just kind of came out knowing that, like this intuitive knowing. So there's a few things. Well, so
the information has to be somewhere.
It's got to be.
It's information, and it's stored somewhere, and whether it's in your cells or
I think it could be epigenetics, but epigenetics simply means above the genes, so it's not really in the genes, but it's a memory from somewhere else.
It's kind of like an instinct, right? You instinctively know something, but you don't even know where that instinct came from.
Yeah. And like David said, that information is in your genetics, and I'd be really willing to go with that, but I think the explanation is epigenetics, which is above the genes. Hey, how you doing? The knoll behind the grass. How you doing, sir?
Hello there. Hi.
How you doing? Good to see you, man. How's it been?
Yeah, pretty good. I'd have called in earlier, but life got in the way,
It's okay, Paul. It's all right, man. How do you explain this from a idealistic point of view, all this kind of stuff?
Well, I find that idealism doesn't usually offer alternative explanations and solutions. I find that more often it's the framework surrounding the basic solution that's just different. So, for example, when you've got things going on like savantism and that sort of, like the guy with the, did you say got hit by a baseball?
Uh-huh.
I am very sorry.
Really quickly, you're a little bit muffled. Could you make sure that you're not covering your mic?
I'm not able to.
In fact, I'm gonna change locations. Actually, I think.
Oh, there you go. You already sound better.
Family is downstairs, so I think.
All right.
I need to pop upstairs to keep this a bit more. Yeah, sorry about that. I'll get
all right,
someone.
Can hear you a bit clearer now.
Oh, that's good. That's good. Glad to hear it. So, yeah, I mean, a lot of the materialists that I've been speaking to over the last few years or so, they use things like brain damage to potentially to evidence materialism. They're like, if brain damage from like being hit by a baseball can affect the mind, then the position that they come to is they say, well, this shows us we have something physical affecting something else physical, the brain, and having an impact on the mental. And so we've got not just a correlation that you get, like, with brain scans and then matching up with certain thoughts. They take the position that this is some sort of evidence of causation. That the hammer,
dogs,
the hammer or the drug or the baseball or whatever it is that causes the physical interaction is having an impact on the mental. Of course, the trouble with that is that in order to prove this physicalist theory, you're having to make a physicalist presumption from the get-go.
Right.
You're having to say, well, the brain isn't necessarily a physical thing. The baseball is a necessary physical thing. The drug or the alcohol or the hammer or the piano or whatever it is that's interacted with the brain is also a physical thing. Therefore, that's giving you evidence of the physical impact in the mental. But that's circular reasoning, because unless you have a reason to actually specify that all of these things are intrinsically, fundamentally physical in the first place, then you're just assuming physicalism in order to prove physicalism. And if you tell these people that you can assume the Bible to prove the Bible, they're pretty sure to come back at you with some objections to that.
Right.
But apparently it's not a problem to them to assume physicalism in order to prove physicalism.
Does idealism have the same problem, would you say? Because that's what Joel, I think, was getting at.
Does idealism have the same problem?
He would, yeah, go ahead.
Well, it depends on how one is arguing for idealism, you see. If somebody does take circular reasoning route to arguing for the probability of an idealistic metaphysic, then yeah, it'll have the same problem. But as long as you avoid doing that, then no. You don't have that problem if you're not relying on these methods to make your case.
Well, it seems like there is some sort of epistemic circularity that's sort of inescapable, though. Because if you think about it, I think, therefore I am. Or you could say, I experience, therefore I exist, right? Like, the only reason I know I exist is because I'm conscious of existing. So that is the basis of the belief, right? Like, I exist, I'm conscious. Therefore, when I go through this whole idealistic argument to get back to, therefore consciousness is the fundamental thing. So is that sort of a circular loop somehow, or is that not really? Or how would you resolve that?
Okay, well, for starters, I don't think I would go quite as far as Descartes in the first instance. So to say I think, therefore I am, I think what you're doing there is you're taking experience and you're bringing the subject in my estimation too early.
Damn it.
So, for example, the Buddhists would have a problem with I think, therefore I am, because they're saying, oh right, so the egoic self exists, and that's not what they think. It's not what the Hindus think. It's not what the mystics think. essentially all the yogis. You know, there's a whole bunch of folks who are more like, okay, we'll start with just an experiences. So rather than automatically assume that we can generate a subject from that, we start with the first step to say just some experience is happening. That's the given. The given known is that there is experience. And what you take as the next part from that is that it's a conjecture to say that if there's an experience, there's an experiencer, which is fine. But if you're just saying there's an experiencer, you're not necessarily invoking I-ness. You're not saying the experience is me. You're not saying it's Paul. You're not saying it's Scott who's having this experience. Right. So you're making less of a assumption from the get go, and that I think is how I would.
Yeah, that's kind of how I solve it too, because I'm only using experience as a known property to explain something rather than introduce an unknown. You know, and we know that materialism, material matter, you know, all of that stuff is kind of an abstraction. It has no standalone existence on its own. So I would just say,
and then we can,
go ahead.
And we can see that we can kind of come to that conclusion when we take the whole telepathy tapes into consideration. How could I know what's in your head when you didn't tell me? You know, unless consciousness is fundamental. Like, how would I know? Tell me from a materialistic perspective how that would be possible. And then mostly what I've heard from materialists is, well, we haven't proven that. We don't know if that's even real, or, you know, so we have to assume that all these people are conspiring to lie to us when they're recording these children, you know, and I just think that's intellectually dishonest, because who the hell is going to go out of their way to do all that? Which, I mean, it's not impossible, but.
Well, anything's possible in a magical kingdom.
Right.
You know, it's about what's plausible, you know.
Are we going to just continue to ignore that for thousands of years people have had these experiences? People that didn't know each other, people that lived at different times.
In philosophy, that's called the normative. So, like in philosophy, actually, when you look up mystical experience, they say that that's actually well, it's actually not called a mystical experience, it's called religious experience in philosophy. But the religious experience is a normative. So it's taken as a normal thing, like a mundane fact of reality. People have a religious experience. This is nothing new. So based on that, you can't use that, oh, this is an extraordinary situation that requires extra special explanation. No, religious experience has happened in different cultures over different times up until today. And so it's actually classified as a normative. So that kind of makes a difference. Yeah.
So those children, they're just having a religious experience.
Yeah, which I want to get back to that Dean Radin video, because that kind of explains a little bit about a lot of that. And yeah, there are plenty of people that are motivated to fake stuff. Obviously, like David said, plenty of people are motivated to fake things these days. Obviously.
Well, but, I'm not faking things like that happen to me. I'm offended.
No. Yeah, I mean, you know, I think that you know, I don't know, saying, like, for example, a guy murdered, killed, publicly executed, and then 3 days later raised from the dead. That's an extraordinary, that's not a normative belief. That's not a normative event. By definition, it's not even supposed to be a normative event. That's what makes it a miracle, is the fact that it isn't something that happens normally. And so in that case, I think the more plausible explanation would be either a lie or some sort of deception or conspiracy theory.
Or symbolism.
But in the case of religious experiences, I don't think that's in the same category because they're more normative. They happen all the time, and a lot of
Can I
people
try and
claim
tie those two together for you, Scott?
Yeah, sure.
Because one of the ways to look at the biblical story of the resurrection is, yeah, you can argue till the cows come home as to the historical accuracy of it, but actually, I find in a lot of these things you get more out of it if you think more symbolically than historically. And,
right. Well, yeah. Well, I'm only talking about the literalists. Yeah.
Well, sure. But when you talk about the transcendent experience, there are parallels that you can draw between that and the resurrection story on a symbolic level. So whether or not it happened literally, you can look at the idea of dying to yourself as you do in what they call ego death.
Yeah.
Well, that's
And
the
draw
Gnostic.
these parallels.
That's just Gnostic interpretation.
Yeah,
But the Christian apologists will vehemently disagree with you on that.
Yeah, because they say Gnostics are heretics. That he died to himself, and ego death, and
I've no
Christ
problem being a
consciousness.
heretic.
Yeah.
Just because I'm not
by the
naked
way,
doesn't mean I'm
Paul,
not a heretic.
are you a Christian idealist? By the way, I wanted to ask.
I wouldn't necessarily use the label Christian for myself. I'm more universalist than that. So I've got a lot of time for Christianity, but at the same time, a lot of time for like Hinduism, Taoism, Buddhism.
Okay.
So
you're perennialist, would you say?
Yeah, more of a perennialist. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you're just like a mystic then.
I guess. I mean, they're all labels, you could probably come up with hundreds of them, and at the end of the day, I don't like trying to attach myself too much to labels, particularly when it comes to opinions like this. Because if I say I am X, and X is like atheist or panentheist or pantheist or dualist or non-dualist, etc. If I'm saying I am this, then I'm already too attached in terms of my identity to this opinion. You find that people will say that I am an atheist or I am a Christian, and so as much as they might claim to be open-minded, if you start debating with them, their identity's on the line. They've got
I agree.
Their sense of self. So I do try to avoid.
It's just that other people are always going to try to label you. And like with me personally, people say, "Oh, you're an atheist." I'm not really an atheist. "Oh, you're an agnostic atheist." I'm not really an agnostic. So like everybody else always tries to put me in some kind of category, and really, I can't do that because
Sophia, I invented my own label to suit this very purpose. My own new label. I call myself a demi-gnostic.
I know that's right.
Can you spell that out for us in the comments or something?
DEMI, and then a hyphen, and then GNOSTIC, demi-gnostic.
Okay.
In sort of like, I've taken inspiration from the verbiage from the trans community in terms of them say like a demi boy or a demi girl. So
I got
to be demi-gnostic, you kind of take the Gnostics line, as I was saying before, about symbolism, and Scott rightly said that that's a heretical Gnostic interpretation. But then you say, rather than necessarily rejecting all of the more literal aspects, you just say, I don't know about that stuff. When people want to anthropomorphize God, you don't say they're wrong. You just say, well, I'm yet to be convinced about that. That's the agnostic position. So to be demi-gnostic, you've got that touch of Gnosticism and a touch of agnosticism building into this. I think it's quite an honest epistemic viewpoint. Where you just say, there is this that I believe in terms of the transcendent, in terms of the oneness and non-duality and all that good stuff. And then there's a lot of other stuff that I don't necessarily accept, I don't necessarily reject, I just don't know enough about it. I can't really say much about the
Right.
historicity of Jesus. They can't really necessarily say much about whether there's an anthropomorphic God or whether there's divine ways of the universe answering prayer. I mean, when it comes to prayer, I think there are a lot of psychological ways in which it's impactful. I think it can change you internally. For example, if you give prayers of thanks on a regular occasion, that can cultivate a sense of gratitude in you. And without there even being a divine element to reality, that sense of gratitude is a positive thing to cultivate. You know. And it goes with any other strength that you pray for. If you need more patience and you pray for patience, what do you think is going to happen? If you regularly pray for patience, what do you think is going to happen in terms of your patience? It seems fairly reasonable that, like, just somebody is listening. Whether or not there's a God, somebody is listening when you pray, and that somebody is yourself.
Yeah.
You're listening. And so if you regularly pray for things that you need, courage, wisdom, patience, insight, guidance, all of these things, like, it doesn't have to be a God for prayer to be effective. It just has to be a subconscious. It just has to be like a part of you listening that you can basically program with all of this whole good, wholesome stuff. And you can do that. And it doesn't matter who you're praying to. You can pray to Joe Pesci, you can pray to your son, you can pray to Muhammad,
Joe Pesci.
you can pray to Allah.
Joe Pesci gets shit done.
Yeah, indeed. Absolutely.
I just think we all should be. We all can. One thing I just don't like is when people say prove it, prove it, prove it, and I'm like, some things we just are unable to prove in the way that people want it to be proven, but we can lean towards something based on reasonable reasons. You know what I mean? And it irks me when somebody keeps challenging that and says you're making a claim. You're not making a claim. You're just saying that because of these reasonable reasons, I'm leaning towards this. And that's not necessarily my belief, because that can change if I come across new information. You know what I'm saying? And it really irks me when contrarians just, in a way, get upset because you're leaning towards an idea and want to explore it. Like, to me, that's ass backwards, because isn't that the whole premise of science?
Yes. Yes.
Plenty of it is healthy skepticism, but with the idea that prayer is impactful with or without a deity or a divine element to reality. There's enough literature out there on the efficacy of neurolinguistic programming to back this concept up. So there is data that you can point to. I mean, some of the stuff about NLP is rubbish.
Yes.
You know,
I really like it when things can come together. Like, you know, obviously, there are subjective realities, you know, to things, but it's always really good when there's also objective facts that can also correspond to the subjective reality. That just kind of makes the case a little better for me. That's not necessarily necessary for a thing to be true or not, but it just makes it easier for me to digest or understand, you know. But
Joel said his ears
are itching. You talking about
burning.
Sophia? You talking about?
No, I'm saying this in general, because my boyfriend, me and him get into heated debates because he's more of a materialist off screen than he is on screen, and he tends to do that a lot. And that wasn't a comment directed at Joel.
Yeah. Cool. Well, I'm gonna play a little bit more of this video with Dean Radin. He kind of goes into some of this. Hold on. Let me expand.
So now we must leave our senses. We're actually leaving the ordinary senses. So the kinds of experiences then that we can study and do study at IONS can be cast into these terms. There's terms like telepathy and psychokinesis and clairvoyance and precognition. All of these are commonly reported. These are the kinds of things that we can study in the lab. So today we're only going to look at telepathy. So in the most popular conscious form of telepathy experiment that has been done for the last 50 years or so, it's called the Ganzfeld method, and it's a German word that means whole field. And so you have a person put into this Ganzfeld state, we'll call them the receiver, and so you have a red light shine on them. Then you take a ping pong ball cut in half and you put one half over each eye, so all they can see with their eyes open is pink. And then you put headphones on them that are playing white noise. So they can't see anything, they can't hear anything, but they're not sleeping either. They're still awake. And now you have a person playing the role of a sender, a telepathic sender, who looks at a randomly selected target and is going to try to inject the perception of that target into the thoughts of the other person. So rather than sending something, what appears to be happening more in these experiments is the correlation. That is, what is arising in the sender's mind seems to arise in the receiver's mind. And that is better than a transmission model because we don't see signals here, we see correlations. So in another experiment, the sender might see an elephant, and the receiver in the Ganzfeld state is asked to speak aloud anything that comes to mind. And so maybe they say something about an animal, maybe it's something about its gray. So then we take the person out of the Ganzfeld state. There were 4 images, one of which was sent by the sender, and we play back anything that the receiver said so they can be reminded of their impressions. So you can see at a glance here that the chance of the receiver being correct is 1 in 4. So here we have Gail, who's our guest today, being set up for the Ganzfeld experiment. And these are the ping pong balls over her eyes. And so this is where the experiment was done. Gail is inside our 2,000-pound electromagnetically shielded chamber, which we had when we had the Earthrise campus in Northern California. And these are the 4 targets that were randomly selected, one of which was going to be sent by another person elsewhere in the building. And so this is what Gail said. Something has a rough texture, tall, looking up high, like in an art gallery or in a museum, a Yosemite kind of image of a tall rock, monolithic, images of Mount Rushmore, and half dome, like a big stone. And since Gail is on the call today, you can ask her later what it actually felt like from the inside to get those impressions, because she had no idea what the image was that was being sent. But if you're now the judge in this experiment and you know that one of those 4 pictures was the actual target, which one would you select? Well, it turns out that this was the target. This is what was being sent, which matches the best among all of the other 4 pictures. And in fact, that's the one that Gail selected. So now Skeptic Dog says, yeah, but are these telepathy experiments independently repeatable, which is what's necessary in science to gain confidence that it's a real thing? So when you look at the experimental investigations of telepathy using this kind of method, and precursor methods too, from about the 1920s until today, lots of places. These happen to be ones at universities, but also they've been done at private institutes around the world. If you look at the 122 experiments that have been published in 20 different labs, there's 4,674 sessions like the one that I demonstrated from what Gail did. So there's over 4,000 sessions like that. And when you look at each of the 122 experiments and you look at the hit rate, well, the line in the middle is chance, the dashed line, but these dots are the actual hit rates and the error bars are the 1 standard error bars. So we can take the same data, since all of the experiments were based on the same idea, and just make a cumulative graph as though it's just one huge long experiment involving all 4,000 sessions. And that's what you get. This is a cumulative hit rate over 4,600 sessions. This has been reported repeatedly in the academic psychology literature and one of the main publications in psychology, starting in 1994. I think the last was in 2018. And so there's the overall result. So the overall result, as you can see, is about 31%. And the odds against chance of being there rather than chance is 300 trillion quadrillion to 1, with 10 to the minus 30th.
That's pretty impressive. But if you had to,
Well, that knocks out of the water that it's obviously people faking. Honestly, unless
yes,
you want to be like a flat earther that thinks that the whole world conspired to make you believe that we're on a spinning ball.
yeah. Well, let's use our thinking caps and imagination. How could you call bullshit on that? Could anybody come up with any sort of imaginary hypothesis that could debunk all this experiment? Granted, if it was true,
I'm
which I think.
sorry, you're breaking up, Scott.
So let's say, can you hear me now? So let's say that this experiment is true. It's been
Yes.
verified. How could you debunk it if you had to really try to be use your imagination? What could explain these results?
How would I debunk it? I'm sorry, you're still breaking up.
Yeah, just how could you debunk it? Oh, hold on.
Nothing comes to mind.
Might be me. I can't hear nothing.
Sorry about that. My internet went out for a second. Can you hear me now?
I can hear you.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Okay,
Looks
yeah.
like Alex clunked out too.
Yeah, we all kind of crunched out. Yeah, we're gonna end it soon, but
What were you?
I was asking you if you could use your imagination, somehow figure out how to explain these results, and it not be true that this sort of, telepathy is true. Like, what explanation could you come up with?
In the first one, was some kind of conspiracy. But then the sheer
Conspiracy?
amount of yeah. I mean, one particular instance, like you could have the participants have like a prior agreement that it's going to be X picture out of whatever, and they could fudge it that way, but that would only be for one particular instance. The sheer amount of studies that they use to collate all of that data, I think that it makes that much more unlikely.
Right. And I don't think
I agree.
I agree
that
with
everybody,
Sophia. I don't think they would lie. I mean, what's the point of doing that?
No, like everybody, like you said, that would have to be some massive conspiracy going on, like on a massive scale.
Yeah, it's less plausible, I think, than the phenomena that they're trying to demonstrate.
Hey,
Some
Alex.
kind of phenomena requiring explanation.
If you were coming at it from a materialist point of view, how could you explain these results?
Well, I'm not sure. I'm gonna have to think about that because as of right now, I don't have a coherent answer to give you.
Okay, Paul. From an idealistic perspective, how do you explain those results?
Well, it's a tough one. But from an idealist perspective, we are all an aspect of one single consciousness. So, that being the case, for there to be mind-to-mind communication that doesn't necessarily have a material medium, does seem to be a more easily explainable phenomenon.
You're kind of muffled, unfortunately.
Yeah, sorry, man. I must have had my mic cover off again. Is that any better?
Yeah, keep on going.
Yeah.
Any better?
Yes.
Okay, great.
Yes.
So, yeah, from an idealist perspective, we're aspects of one single consciousness. And so, for there to be mind-to-mind communication does seem to make more sense in that respect. If mind itself isn't emergent, but it's fundamental,
Okay.
then our experiences are emanating from a single mind. And so, if I had a little longer to think about it, I think I could formulate a better response to this. But I think there's a general gist in which the things, they just fit together nicer.
Yeah.
Right.
I think, because you're using consciousness, if that's the fundamental substrate, it would be a little bit more understandable than if something else was the substrate other than consciousness.
Yeah.
Because then you would have to assume some extra things to explain it. So I think, if you're using consciousness as the fundamental, then it's already kind of baked into the hypothesis. And so that makes a lot more sense in that case. Yeah, I think I can get behind that. Well, look, I'm going to try to respect everybody's time here, man. We've been going on for 2 hours and 36 minutes. Everybody like and subscribe, please. We could really use the subscribers and the audience to grow. I wish we could keep on going in. Joel asked, then the question becomes, what is the explanation for why we seem to have limited access to the thoughts of others? Yeah, man, I want to get into that too. But and that goes again into disassociation, which this is the problem. This is what I'm saying. We're on one hand disassociated, but on the other hand, some people, for some reason, are able to break that barrier. And I know a materialist would probably say that like Alex presented, that maybe a materialistic view could be that, well, consciousness sort of emerges and evolves in such a way that when the brain is disrupted or broken in one area, it becomes accentuated in another area. So that would be a materialistic explanation. And then on idealism, it would just say that, well, normally we're disassociated, but because consciousness is the substrate, it is possible for people to break the disassociation that way. So yeah, that's what I've got so far. But anyways, I do have to cut it short. We're running short on time. We've gone on so long, man. I appreciate everybody for dialing in. Like Joel, thanks for coming through. Thanks, Paul, for jumping in, man. I really appreciate your viewpoints as well.
Thanks for having me, Scott. My pleasure.
Yeah, man. We'll do this again next week, and join us. We'll have another interesting conversation.
All right. It was good to be a part of the show.
Yeah, man. Always.
I can't wait to
All right.
be back. All the stuff I missed.
Yep.
Yeah.
All right, guys.
See y'all around.
All right. We'll see you later. Bye-bye.